What's going on, everybody? This is Bobby G back again with another Saturday Shpiel. I'm going to be switching it up a little bit for about the next year, starting today. Reason why is because this past week we had Simchat Torah, which is the rolling back of the Torah scroll, both in the traditional as well as the Messianic Jewish communities, myself, or people who identify as Jewish Christians, as it were, like myself. And today, this week, is what's known as Parashat Bereshit, which is in the beginning. Now, people who, like myself, are Jewish Christians, aka Messianic Jews. We do things a little differently because traditionally in synagogues they usually have two readings and perhaps a psalm. In the case of the Messianic community, because of the New Testament, what we call the New Covenant, we actually have three. And in this case, what I'm going to title this particular message this week is Know Where Things Start and Know Where Things Are Going. And the passages for this week come out of the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 6, verse 8. Isaiah chapter 42, verse 5 to chapter 43, verse 10. The book of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 17, as well as the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verses 6 through 21. And if you look through all of these translations, or all of these passages, you find a common theme. And that's one of the things that we also do when we do these passages in Messianic Jewish synagogues and congregations, as we call them, is we try to find what is the commonality, or what is the tie that binds through all of these passages. Obviously there's God, obviously there's Yeshua, Jesus, and all of that. But let's think about it. From Genesis 1 to Genesis 6, you have creation, fall, and then we end up with the generations coming down from Adam and Abel, who's later murdered by his brother Cain, Cain's descendants, as well as Seth's descendants, who is the child that was born after Abel, and their descendants, and we end up getting about to Noah, and that's where we stop. Which, for those who don't know, the name Noah, or Noach, as it would be in Hebrew, actually means rest. So, it's interesting how that's going to go on into the next week. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 42, verse 5 to chapter 43, verse 10, we see how God recounts to Israel how he created all things and how he speaks of redemption and things like that. In the book of John, in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 17, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And it eventually goes on to say that nothing that was made was without him made that was made. Nothing was made without him. And the Word came and tabernacled among us. And in some translations it says, dwelt among us, but the proper translation would be tabernacled among us, or pitched his tent among us. In other words, God came down in human form, which we know as Yeshua, Jesus. And in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, it talks about the new Jerusalem, the new city, the new heaven, the new earth, and all that. So there's a sense of newness. There's a continual sense of newness in everything. And it all starts with God. It all comes back to God. It all goes back to the beginning. And where the things in the beginning eventually lead to. And what Yeshua, Jesus, the start of the Messianic age, leads to. Which eventually is the new city, the new heaven, and the new earth. Now in the meantime, there's a lot of time in between that. We see throughout the Old Testament, aka the Tanakh, we see Noah and the flood and what comes after the flood, and also the setup of Abraham's descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, also known as Yitzhak, and all that goes down throughout the ages and all that transpires. So we're going to get into that throughout this next year. But it's just an interesting thing that goes on. And, I've seen a recent trend on social media of how it started and how it's going. A lot of people are doing that in the music world. Some of my friends are doing that in the social media world. And it's an interesting thing because people just kind of say, this is where things started, this is where things are going. To which I ask you, those who are viewing this video, where have things started for you in the Lord, and how are they going up to this point? To put myself out there, I've been walking with God for, it'll be 21 years this November, this next month. And in 21 years, I started out as this kid who was just on fire, who was hyper, who just wanted to learn, who just wanted to share. And as I've grown over these past 21 years, in terms of learning the Word, learning church history, in terms of where I'm at now, now I'm doing, because of social media, I'm doing Saturday Shpiel, right? I'm doing that for over 20 episodes now, 20 plus episodes. And with that comes a lot of lessons. Some people take insights, some people share, some people may take it as a life lesson of what I'm speaking in these videos. But however you take it, I want you to take this particular question. How have things in your life been in terms of God? Or even if you don't have God, how has your life been? And where is it going? What direction do you see yourself going? Are you living in the purpose for which you were created? Have you had any slip-ups along the way? Because we see a lot of characters and a lot of people in Scripture who were God's people, you had people like David, who was a man after God's own heart, but David also had his indiscretions, shall we say, or his slip-ups. You look at Paul. Paul was a persecutor of the church at one point. Yet he became the Apostle Paul, which is wild if you think about it. A man who was raging after the church, who had beef with the church, all of a sudden became one of the church's biggest promoters, or one of the gospel's biggest spokesfolks, or spokespeople, if you will. And so that's where things started. That's where things are going. As far as the gospel, it started with Jesus, which goes all the way back to the beginning, and Jesus traces it back, especially if you go to Matthew and Luke. We have the genealogies of where things are, where they're at, and where they're going. So again, I ask you as you go through these passages, one more time, just to kind of bring it back around. It's Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 6, verse 8. Isaiah chapter 42, verse 5 to chapter 43, verse 10. John chapter 1, verses 1 through 17, and Revelation chapter 22, verses 6 through 21. I encourage everybody who hears these scriptures to read them on your own, study them on your own, look through them, study them, see the common traits, and if you can, try to look through these scriptures from where they start in Genesis to where they go in Revelation, and see if you can find the common patterns in between. And ask yourself, in terms of belief, in terms of faith, where did things start and where are they going on a personal level? My name is Bobby G. This is Saturday Shpiel. Lord willing, I'll see you all next week. Peace.